Hey y'all, thank you for joining us this evening for Queerly Beloved, a conversation on queer romance novels. My name is Martin Malelu, and I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a librarian with LA County Library, as well as the head of the Pride Committee. I would like to introduce you to Kay Wantuck, who uses she, her pronouns, and is a librarian with LA County Library, a Pride Committee member, as well as an avid romance reader. Kay will be interviewing Leah Koch, who uses she, her pronouns. Leah is one of the owners of the Ripped Bottas, along with her sister and best friend, Bee. It is the only exclusively romance bookstore on the West Coast, opening March 4th in 2016, following a successful Kickstarter campaign. It's proudly women and queer owned. Leah initially moved to Los Angeles to attend USC, preferring the eternal sunshine to Chicago winters. She never left. When she isn't reading, she enjoys crafting and DIY, watching women's soccer, and the antics of her 3 cats. And now I'll pass it over to Leah and Kay.
Hi and welcome everyone. I'm happy to have you all here. Romance novels are a big part of my life. I definitely read a ton of them as a kid, snuck them out of my mother's closet. I am sure we have many romance novel readers who are in our audience today who have similar stories about sneaking romance novels off the shelf to read secretly behind their parents' back. Or maybe you're a new reader and you just picked one up during the pandemic and you're hooked and you can't wait for more. But my name is Kay. I'm a children's librarian at the Acaboni Library, which is part of the LA County Library. And I am so happy to have Leah here from the Ripped Bottas. They are a bookstore in Culver City. And so, Leah, I would love to hear a little bit more about your bookstore in general. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Like what makes it so great?
Great. Hi, everybody. Hope everyone's having a good evening. I hope there are people here. I guess I don't really know. Hello. My name is Leah. Nice to meet you all. So the Ripped Bottas is located in Culver City, California. If you're not super familiar with LA, that's pretty central. And it's a great neighborhood. And we have been open for almost 6 years. It'll be 6 years on March 4th. And when we opened, we were the only exclusively romance bookstore in the United States. There's now one other one. So I can't really say that anymore, but I still think it's like pretty close. They're located in our hometown of Chicago, actually.
That's amazing.
They're great too. That's called Love Sweet Arrow. And we specialize in romance novels. We don't only sell romance novels. We have assorted other things. We sell a little bit of general fiction, some poetry, some nonfiction, sexual health and wellness, but about 90% of our books are romance novels. I was talking to somebody earlier who was not clear on the definition of a romance novel. So we'll just touch on that briefly.
Yes, that's good. That's good.
You only need 2 things to be a romance novel. You need a central love story and a happy ending. So
that's the best part.
Story is easy to tell because if you took the love story out of the book and there's still a book, it's probably just a novel. And that, I mean, there's plenty of books like that, but if you took the love story out and there's just like shambles laying there, it's a romance novel. And it has to have a happy ending. I don't know, it feels like every 6 months someone tries to sneakily get around that and do something different. You're welcome to do something different. You just been a regular novel.
And that's the payoff. The payoff is the happily ever after, that everything ends up okay.
Happily ever after has evolved a lot over, I don't know, 50 years, 100 years. We can talk more about that, but you do have to have a happy ending. And so the big difference between our store and a normal bookstore is that at a normal, I don't know, regular bookstore, generally all the romance is shelved in one place alphabetically. So you're going to have, I'm trying to pull a name off the top of my head. I don't know, Jennifer Ashley, Scottish historicals next to Amanda Ashley, werewolves. In my opinion, those do not belong next to each other. So
it makes it hard to find. We have this in the library all the time. It's like, well, we're going by author, but like, I really would like some mystery paranormal romance. Do you have a section for that?
Exactly. So we separate everything out. So, browsing sections at our store, as opposed to like fiction and nonfiction, is historical, contemporary, paranormal, erotica, etc. So that's the real big difference about shopping at our store, as well as having booksellers who are very, very knowledgeable about romance novels and little else, as opposed to the opposite.
I have been to the Bottas a couple times, and I've definitely purchased online. And I will definitely say that you are all so knowledgeable. I came home with like 5 or 6 different books when I went, because the Culver City Library is so close to it. I was able to like swing by after work, and it was wonderful. And I ended up buying, because I did notice that you also have a ton of like gifts. I ended up buying like 6 bookmarks and like 5 things for other people. Just be prepared to come away without anything in your wallet. I'm just going to say that.
People are always like, I can't believe it's spending. Tell me not to spend money, and I'm like, oh,
don't spend any money, never. Please don't.
Not at the point.
Yeah, exactly.
But yes, we also we carry a lot of gifts, and those are really fun things to buy, because it's basically like I'm shopping for myself, except I have a much larger budget than I would just for myself. So we have tons of candles, a lot of enamel pins and stickers. Those never seem to go out of style. Notebooks, bookmarks,
trope tea. That's my favorite.
Oh yeah, we make our own tea also.
The trope tea is my favorite.
Available for purchase on our website.
Well, let's go ahead and let's dive into a couple of questions here. It's up to you. Let's go ahead and, since we talked about the business a little bit, we are, it is Women's History Month, but we're also, and it's Valentine's Day, excuse me, I'm thinking about March.
And so a lot going on.
It really is. But, this is, part of our Pride Committee here at the LA County Library. And so what we really want to do is talk and maybe ask you about, how does your identity as a queer business owner inform your business practices? Because I'm very curious about how that works out for you both.
Yeah, I think a lot, but I think I did a panel. I don't even remember what it was for. Hopefully no one from that panel is on this panel. I think it was just about romance in general. And it was like all booksellers, and another bookseller was like talking about like, she's from Texas, not to hate on Texas. There are a lot of nice people in Texas, but
it's very different than California. Yes.
Yeah, she was like, I think we were talking about queer books. It wasn't like a queer books panel, and she was like, we have to like balance the like wants and needs of everyone in our community and respect everyone's opinion. And I literally went, no. I knew what she was saying. Like she didn't
yes.
Right,
I mean, it's for some people, it's the bottom line. The money that doesn't sell.
To be frank, I don't really care about anybody's opinion but my own. Mm-hmm. And my sister's. But we serve no master other than me. Mm-hmm. So I mean, which I know many of you are probably librarians, which stinks. Not that librarians are awesome. But I pretty much get to do whatever I want. So I think that there are business decisions that we make that people might not understand from the outside. I honestly think it has more to do with being a woman than with being gay. I don't know. We'll talk about it more and see what we tease out. But, we've had free menstrual products in our bathroom from the beginning. And women come out of there very excited. And then they're oftentimes male partners are sort of like confused that we would, spend money on that we're not getting money back.
And then you're like, here, let me give you a pamphlet on the pink tax.
Right, which is like a very narrow-minded way of looking at things. I think, I don't think this is that different than any business owner. I mean, I own any bookstore owner. I own a bookstore so I can sell people the books that I like.
Of course. Your agenda.
There's no fair. It's not about being fair to everybody. Like I put the queer books in the front because I want to.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that really kind of sort of like dives into our next question, which is, like you're just doing the work for me. So thanks, Leah. Like, how do you market, more marginalized authors, and romances with marginalized characters to new customers who might not normally seek them out? I know that a lot of straight romance readers are like, I don't know if I could do a queer romance, and I know that there's a lot to appreciate in them because I I love queer romance personally as a queer person. And so, what makes them special? What can someone expect when they pick up a queer romance?
Okay, well, that was like 7 questions in
Okay,
one.
you can just answer whatever one sounds the
We're
most
going to start at
exciting.
the beginning. So this is, so in terms of, we're going to talk about shelving for a second, because I think the first part of the question was, how do you market books with marginalized characters? I mean, 2 straight people, but we'll get to that in a second. So this is something that I really feel like I'm still evolving on. So everyone who's listening, feel free, know that. And because there's a difference between how we shelve books by queer authors and how we shelve books by Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, because of what we've heard from those authors. I'm obviously not a member of that community. So when we were starting out, especially Black authors expressed that they felt really ghettoized by bookstores, by
the title of like urban fiction, where they're all like stuck in one corner.
Exactly. In an African American section, in a Black history section, even if it's not a Black history book, whatever. So I really took that to heart. And so, any book by a Black, Indigenous, or other person of color would be shelved according to its subgenre. So,
supernatural, paranormal,
exactly.
meet cute, bookstore romance, anything like that. It would be.
Yeah. Now we do still have a queer section, and a big one. And if it ever got to a point where like lots of queer authors were telling me that they felt like it was a similar thing, like they were being, sidelined in some way, I would certainly take that to heart. Currently, I feel like most people want that section for visibility.
It's interesting because I was thinking about this while you're talking about this and our setup here at the library. And, because you're a bookstore, you have a lot better of a situation because you can pick up 5 or 6 copies of a book by a Black queer author, and you can put it in 2 places. You could put it in Supernatural where it belongs, or in the queer romance,
Yeah, and we do that. So as of right now, we still have the queer section, and it's pretty big, and it's in the front of the store. And we do double shelf things a lot. And that is to gently ensnare straight people. Not in a malicious way.
Yeah, but just getting them to pick up something they may not normally pick up.
So, the other reason I think that the queer section is still really important is that I do think there's still a large group of people who aren't comfortable asking for that. So, we try to make, that's why it's in the front. We try to make the signage really clear. And, I don't mean to get too deep into this. It's, when a Black person comes in and asks for books by Black authors, as a general matter, most Black people can't hide the fact that they're Black.
Yeah, names or the marketing that the cover has on the front of it.
Exactly. So sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. Anyway, but I think there are, especially, young people who might not be comfortable asking for where that section is. So we just try to make it really
as clear as possible. Yeah, no, I mean, that is, a tenet of the library as well when we're creating spaces for people is giving them things before they realize they need it, and keeping things clearly labeled and right out front so you can just pick up information without feeling shame or uncomfortability asking for help or directions, And
I think that's the other thing with double shelving is, and again, I'm joking. I don't mean that we're actually trying to trap people.
But we are.
Because, of what I said earlier about how the store is displayed. So, you're looking at the Supernatural shelves, looking for things you might not have seen before. If the thing you care about the most is that it's supernatural, if you pick up, a book about lesbian werewolves, maybe you don't care that they're lesbian werewolves.
Yeah, because some people wouldn't think about it, especially with the marketing of the cover or the way the summary is, or even somebody, on the front being like, well, Nora Roberts said this was amazing, so I have to pick it up,
Yeah, and I think, not to generalize too much, but the younger somebody is, the less they care about whether the sexuality of the people in the book expressly matches their own.
Yeah, the dynamics are a little.
That's a really great thing, and even people younger than me. So I think there's still again, not to generalize, but I'm generalizing, they're, the places where you find resistance to reading queer books, if you yourself are not queer, tend to be older and, let's face it, whiter.
Well, and I think there's a lot to have a conversation about with just the trends in romance, that people like. My mother is Mexican, so this doesn't count, but it does count because she only read, and the books that I grew up reading were, white historical characters, in Regency romance, or if I was lucky, I could get a medieval romance in there. So, I mean, what they're used to is that. It is Jude Devereaux, it is Nora Roberts, it is, who's my other? Judith McNaught, there we go. Joanna Lindsay. So, that's what they're used to. So I could see just the exposure of being able to pick up something new and saying, oh, this might be interesting is worth it. Mm-hmm. And then what do you think makes queer romance so special? That was like the second part of the question.
Oh, right. Thank you for reminding me. To me, it's, and we're getting now back into a little bit about like what makes romance unique. Mm-hmm. So we have to talk about what a trope is, in case anyone who's listening doesn't know what that is. It's basically like a plot convention. So like if you read a lot of mystery books, like a red herring is a trope. In romance, they tend to be things like the
sharing, bed sharing, only one bed. Oh no.
Like enemies to lovers, like
yes.
We hate each other, but we secretly want to kiss. Or there's only one bed. I mean, it's all the things that our teas are named after, like why talk when we can pine, which is like we refuse to open our mouths and have a conversation.
But we spend all this time together.
Just longingly gaze at each other across the room. As somebody who grew up before like at least mainstream queer romance was really a thing. I mean, they were there, but
they were hiding in another section, and it was usually right next to the erotica section. And if you were, at the time when I had purchasing power, I was 16 or 17 years old, like I couldn't buy those. I'd go in there and sneak in and just hide in the corner and read them,
So for me, like the exciting thing about queer romance is not that it like quote unquote breaks the mold. It's that in fact it takes the mold and that we enjoy, but puts in queer characters and and makes it more inclusive while still using all those tropes that we love. When we don't have to talk about covers that much, it's like a whole other conversation, but like literally the one behind you, the classic that's called the clinch cover is
those are my favorites.
They're like holding each other. He's probably shirtless. So when they started to put out a couple of queer historicals with photographs on the cover here, yes, that's on my list.
Yes, I have them all sitting over here. So if you want me to lift them to show.
Okay, great. What else is that?
Let's see. We've got, that's the only historical.
I think that's the only historical, actually.
That's the only historical.
So yeah, I love that cover because again, like some people are asking for like totally different, but what I want is just like, I want like traditional romance novels.
This was probably one of the ones I picked up when I was going through a historical sort of phase. And I was like, man, I could really go for a lesbian historical romance. And I was like, okay, Olivia Waite. All right. I was like, this is perfect. It's exactly what I was looking for. A little bit of angst.
Yeah. And it's really exciting to me, as someone who's read a bazillion historical romances, to read something. And, historical, it's a delicate line to walk between making it quote unquote realistic.
Yes. And
making it fun. But I think the people who generally tend to say things aren't realistic are oftentimes incredibly inaccurate in their facts.
Well, and romance novels just in general, and in general, romance novels are incredibly well researched, and I feel like that's something that. That's a whole thing we can talk about, how romance as a genre is, ignored, but it's incredibly well researched, so they don't know what they're talking about.
Right. And, I think what most of those people are saying, not to put words in my hypothetical stranger's mouth, is like, they're not sad enough. Everyone isn't being mean enough to these nice queer people. Like,
we suffer enough. Can't we have some happiness?
Right. And they're like, they're not suffering enough. It's not realistic because everyone doesn't hate them. And it's like, the good one, the good books, like, yeah, okay, like they understand that like everything isn't hunky-dory, but that queer people have always existed and have always found ways to, carve out their communities and live, relatively peacefully. And that looks, different in different time periods. And that's what's super interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. And there is something so nice about reading a historical romance. And like that's kind of part of, we had a question in here about, how do, like, that you've seen historical authors, how do they usually interpret that happily ever after? Because in a lot of like heterosexual romance, the end game is getting married. Maybe not so much in contemporary, because I think things are changing. But the spending the rest of your life together with in a committed relationship of some way. Like, how do historical queer romance authors navigate that? That's my question.
Yeah, it's a good one. And I mean, I think it speaks to a larger trend of, happily ever after used to mean married with a baby. The baby comes in the epilogue and it's very exciting.
Yes, or it's a trope baby and they get pregnant early.
Yeah. I still like that. It's fun. Yes, but I think largely, happily ever after has been greatly expanded to I think actually be more literal. It's like you just have to be happy. Mm-hmm. And that takes a lot of different forms. So sometimes it's married with a baby, sometimes it's deciding to get a dog. Sometimes I'd say typically in historical, it's just like basically verbalizing the desire to live together the rest of your days or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's obviously less focus on like legalities.
That paper commitment is much different.
But I would say it is generally it really is like basically the sort of verbalization of commitment. Mm-hmm. Also, I should say commitment isn't required for happily ever after, because then we get into, poly romances or people in ethically non-monogamous relationships. There are books where it ends with them like basically being like, we're going to stay together and also see other people.
Yeah, no. And those romances, would I have seen them, 15 years ago or 20 years ago? I feel like the publishing industry has changed so much to leave space for a lot of different kinds of romance, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I mean, I really do think happily ever after should be like taken almost at its most literal. Like,
are we happy at the end? Was the bad guy yes.
Ever after is just like the book ends.
Nebulous. Nebulous.
Yeah, exactly. It's like off in the world. There they are.
I always wonder about this is like how do we get these more diverse love stories that we're talking about into the hands of our readers and then, into the library because, and to customers, because one of the things that as I was researching questions for here, we come up with a lot of different presses. Like, for example, Adore from Carina Press was one that I noticed that, I think that's their LGBTQ imprint. Yeah. Which I thought was wonderful, but like, they're a smaller, industry. There's ones that only do ebooks, because I think, a lot of the publishing industry doesn't see them as powerhouses. So how do you, for any of our readers, our attendees here, how do we get those books into our hands or in our libraries or in our bookstores?
There's two parts of the question. Mm-hmm. So the one part is books that actually exist, and then the other part is books that don't exist. Mm-hmm. So that one's actually easier.
Okay, let's start there.
We can't create books that don't exist. So that's easier to answer. I don't work in publishing. I work at the very, very, very end. So, the only way to get people to create books that don't exist is to sell more of what they would consider a comp. And, basically prove the buying power and the desire for queer romance. It's not, I wouldn't say it's not the best. There at some point, there's only so much you can do if you're not the person purchasing the manuscripts. So I guess what you can do is become an editor at a publishing company.
and just push your agenda,
and buy
force
the
them in a
books.
corner.
So we'll dispense with that for now. Let's just talk about books that exist.
Yeah.
Okay, now library, very different than bookstore. So, and everybody has different rules.
Mhm.
But basically, number one, everybody needs to work harder. Number two, you have to do away with rules that are preventing you from getting these books. So many independent bookstores do not carry self-published books for a variety of reasons, oftentimes that they're not returnable. But you're putting up a huge barrier to getting a ton of books for a reason that doesn't hold a ton of water with me. So get rid of that rule and then start, looking at all these self-published books. If they don't sell, there are other ways to get rid of them. But when you're talking about a community that has been marginalized by publishing, that means you have to look outside traditional publishing.
You have to work harder and to find them. Mm-hmm.
So the same applies to smaller presses. I think, it's easier for people to get their hands on them. Again, talking about things we can't control, like small press books tend to be pretty expensive, which is not ideal. But I do think the sort of dismantling of artificial barriers that are keeping you from acquiring books is a good place to start. Not to assume anyone is not good at their job, but working harder. So, and getting out of traditional places that you find books.
Yeah, if you're talking about from a librarian's perspective, we look at places like Kirkus Reviews, we look at other different places, and those places are great for finding the bestsellers, but they're not going to help you find
at all. You need to get
queer romance.
On TikTok. You need to get on Twitter. You
need Bookstagram ASAP.
Right. That's not going to help you at all.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to get to more like small bloggers who are covering this, or even just readers, exactly like who are on Bookstagram and Book Talk, and I don't know what we call Book Twitter, whatever.
Book Twit. I think it's Book Twit. Yeah.
Yeah, but so again, it's the same thing. It's thinking outside of traditional models. If Kirkus is the traditional model, you've got to go beyond that.
Well, that's amazing to think about, because it's something that as I said, when I was researching, it was difficult, because when you sent me that entire list of books that we have, that we will give to all of our attendees in an email, a follow-up email, you'll have the list of books that Leah has already suggested for you, which I'll go ahead and I'll do the quick cover through here. We only didn't have 2, which I was very impressed with.
That's
and
good.
I brought it up to to our collections development, and collections development purchased those last 2 real quick. So I'm just going to quickly go through this. Let me pull out. We've got Love Study, which I was excited about because there's a non-binary character in it. That made me really excited. We've got a lesbian romance written, oh my God, of course I got the sad one, Written in the Stars, which I didn't get a chance to read, but I know has been on a lot of book clubs recently in
really
the
good.
county. This one I started reading right before I left work today, which is For the Love of April French, with a trans woman, and that made me really excited. I already liked it. Let's see. And we talked about Care and Feeding of Waspish Widows, which is
our last one is pretty dirty, FYI.
Oh yeah, no, I started it at work and I was like, oh, okay.
It's pretty dirty, just so you know.
I mean, that's the great part about romance, is that you get the gamut from sweet to explicit, and there's nothing I like better than, pulling out a book and being like, "Ooh, is this going to be sweet or explicit?" Meet Cute Club, which I also read.
Very sweet, much on the sweeter side.
Yes. And Secret Ingredient, also like not necessarily sweet. It reminded me a lot of the contemporary romances that I used to read. Was it Silhouette? Kind of reminded me a little bit of that.
Why I liked it. Yeah, it's small town. It's very found family.
2 chefs that they start out antagonistic, but then they fall in love. And then we did have a question question, which maybe I will go ahead and let you answer right now, about young adult queer romance.
Yeah.
And so I'm sorry about the glare. We've got You Should See Me in a Crown. And then the one that I read a few months ago that I really enjoyed. Gosh, there we go. Tell Me How You Really Feel, which I thought was really fun and like very evocative being here in Los Angeles, you know?
Yeah, those are both YA. Amina May Safi is a local Los Angeles author. LA is a big, part of the books. That second one, Tell Me How You Really Feel, is she describes it, and we stole it and describe it as if Paris and Rory from Gilmore Girls dated each other instead of boys. And yeah, I mean, there's a ton of YA. I always say, it goes, the younger the audience is, the more inclusive the books are. So children's books are the best, then young adult, then adult. So there are tons and tons of other young adult ones. Case and Calendar has a really good, I can picture it, I'm blanking on the name. It's orange.
I'll go ahead and I'm going to write these down, and I'll make sure to somehow add them to something so that everyone can get them.
Sounds good.
It's orange. Oh my goodness. Are you a library patron?
I can't remember anything else about it, but it's good. Ship It by Britta London is another of my favorites. It's very much about like fandom culture.
Sounds like something I'd like.
Right. Just like being obsessed with a TV show or comic or something like that. She's also local to LA. What's the other one I'm thinking of? We'll keep going. I'll think of it later.
I think that was everything. I think I might be missing 3 from your list.
Just hold up the list. I can read.
Oh, good. Wonderful. My question is, and this was one that we had kind of had on the list, but we ended up saying, but like, I feel like a lot of people, especially if they're new to romance, they're not sure where to start. Like, should I start with YA? Should I start with adult? Like, and then there's that whole weird middle ground of new adult. What does queer romance look like?
Pretend that doesn't exist.
Okay, good.
You confuse it. They tried to make it a thing. New adult is like protagonist 18 to 25, like before people are like ready to get married. It didn't really take off. And I think it like confuses people. When we're recommending books at the store, you want to choose something based on what you already like. So this isn't like, and remember, this isn't school. It's not supposed to be medicine. So, if you love vampire fantasy books, you shouldn't go read like a historical book just because it has lesbians in it. Like, there are lesbian vampires. It's called Better Off Red by Rebecca Weatherspoon, who's also local to LA.
Which we also have.
They live underneath a sorority house. It's very entertaining. So yeah, you really want to branch off from what you like. So, I meet adults all the time for whom the idea of reading about high school sounds horrible. And like, you would not want to read about YA. You only, want to stay an adult. So it should really be based off, not to say you can't, obviously branch out and try new things, but at the beginning, you want to set yourself up for success. So it should be based off of something that you are inclined to like. And if you absolutely have no idea, adult contemporary is always the best place to start.
Unless
you're a child.
Yeah, unless you're a child.
Unless you're a child.
It's probably the easiest to relate to for people.
It's going to feel the most familiar. You're not like, what is a carriage?
Everyone's always watched at least one rom-com in their life.
Yeah. You're not like, how does this vampire lore work? Like, it's more, it's just easier to drop into.
Let's go ahead. We have a good amount of questions from our audience. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get through as many as possible.
I will try to be brief, as you may have noticed.
No, it's wonderful.
So I will try to answer and stop.
All right, let's go ahead. And I'm an elementary school librarian, and a few of my students have recently asked for romance novels, which, as we have talked about with me sneaking into my mother's closet at, I think I was 12. How do I find middle grade romance stories? Any recommendations?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have a middle grade section. It was actually like the day we opened, we didn't have one. Mm-hmm. And then we had kids and we had young adult. And then, some like 10-year-olds were like, where are the books for me? And we were like, come back in a week. And then, so it's small. And, what we're thinking about at that age is, obviously building strong readers and building a love of reading. And, starting them off on the healthy side of things, you know? I feel like so many people you have to course correct later on because they read some insane Flowers in the Attic or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, not to like diss Flowers in the Attic, but and they're like, ooh, this is the thing for me. So, and you know, I think obviously we are adjusting our idea of what a romance novel is at that age. So Julie Murphy is a fantastic mainly young adult author, but she does have a middle grade book called Sweet Pea. And you know, it's the idea of, you know, introducing crushes, and sort of what that looks like, and again, in a healthy way.
What was her last name again? Julie
Murphy,
Murphy.
Murphy.
Perfect.
Yeah, Murphy.
Mm-hmm.
She wrote Dumplin', which was it's a really good movie. So, you know, that's just one example. And, you know, the nice thing about that is because she has books for older readers, you can kind of continue.
When they're ready
my personal,
to.
like, favorite series that I read all through growing up was the Alice series by Phyllis Reynolds Naylor, which is great to start kids on. It starts when she's in like 4th or 5th grade and then goes all the way until she goes to college.
Oh, wow.
And it's the only person I've ever written a fan letter to, by the way. But, and it's really like that idea of like healthy development, in terms of like, you know, it's normal to like have a crush and like not really know what to do. And like, you know, everyone's a different size,
very age appropriate.
Everything's
so
crazy.
They're not doing what I'm doing, is reading romance novels that are definitely not for my age. Yes.
I know we're mainly talking about fiction, and whoever asked the question, feel free to email me and I'll send you a list, but there's also some great nonfiction. There's a kind of like hybrid graphic novel called What Does Consent Mean Again? And it's kind of like, it's exactly what it sounds like. But I feel like it's so perfect for, you know, 10, 11, 12, when you like, if an adult were to ask you, like, do you know what consent means? They're like, yeah. And then you're like, what does it mean? They're like, I don't know. What does it mean again? So that's a great one to have around. Yeah, anyone who's interested, I'll send you more.
Okay. And then I'm going to go here. We've got someone who said, former Chicagoan. I'm sorry, I definitely said that wrong. Over here, did you work at any of the great bookstores in Chi-Town? No.
I haven't lived in Chicago since I was 18. So unfortunately not. But my two favorites in Chicago are Women and Children First, which has been around for freaking ever, where we used to go all the time as kids, and then a relatively new store called Semicolon, which is a really cool Black-owned bookstore in Chicago.
Cool. Okay. Our next question is, what is the queer book you cannot stop raving about right now? And follow up, who is a queer author that you're excited to see release more work? I know you always get put on the spot if you're not prepared. I'm like, I don't know what I'm reading right now.
Okay. I feel like more work is easier. So many people. I would say, Alexandria Belfleur, who wrote Written in the Stars that we held up, is great, and is sort of up and coming. I would say Penny Ames, who wrote For the Love of April French, that's their first book. So I would love, I'm really excited to see what they do next, because there just aren't a lot of romances featuring trans characters by trans authors.
Yes.
So I would say that's pretty key. Okay, hold on. Just bear with me 1 second. I have a list. Let me pull it up. Because I did whatever I just finished that I obviously can't remember the name of. Really liked it. Okay, for some reason, like 10 books in the last 2 months have been about baking.
They go through trends. You go through trends.
I know. I think everyone got really into
Great British Bake Off during the pandemic.
Then, it took 2 years to write a book, and now they're coming out. So they're different books, almost the same thing. Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly and Chef's Kiss by TJ Alexander, both about baking. Both have non-binary protagonists. They are different books, but I enjoyed both of them. And in terms of, I mean, the interesting thing is that because people find us at, whatever stage is, I still find myself recommending books that are, 10 years old. It's not like they ever
No,
expire.
exactly. Like there are things that I still recommend growing up, like you did, to people who are just looking for a niche book that they can't seem to find, because especially when it comes to queer romance and romance with marginalized or BIPOC characters or authors, that, it becomes a staple or a classic because it's the only thing out there,
Yeah. Anna Burke tends to be a hit with just about everyone. And it's one of those books that sells itself because we pull it off the shelf and we say, futuristic lesbian pirates. And they say, I'll take it.
Oh yeah, I don't think I got that one in time on my list there, but Anna Burke's
Compass Rose.
Compass Rose, and we also purchased Spendthrift, which is by her as well. So those are
a contemporary. That one I love as well. She writes really great found families. It's this like group of veterinarians who all live in this like farmhouse in the middle of Maine, I think, and
it's every queer person's dream.
They have like a tortoise and a horse that they found on the side of the road. It's like, I'm like, wow, this seems like a really great situation you guys have going on here.
Let's see. I've got a couple more questions here. Is there a window dressing that you created that you are most proud of?
Oh, what a lovely question.
Maybe I should just proviso this. They have a nice big window at the Rip Bottas that you do specifically, right? It's like your project that Leah decorates on the regular every month, I think, right?
At some point I decided that was crazy, and now I do like every 45 days, like month and a half.
And so they're beautiful. Yes.
I was like too much. And also like whenever I put it up, I'm like, I don't want to take it down.
Yeah, because you're just so attached to it.
Right. So yes, you can see them all on our Instagram. I did one, this was a couple of years ago now, that it was Pride Not Prejudice. And it was I bought like full-size mannequins and like dressed them in full Regency garb. And it was like two women kissing in the middle. And then I had all the like famous lines from Pride and Prejudice, but I changed all the pronouns.
Beautiful.
And it was like very pretty and cool. I mean, I always spend a lot of time on the Pride window. And 2 years ago, I did like queer heroes, like real people, which was really cool, with like their pictures and stuff. And okay, I know this isn't like explicitly queer, but it kind of is based on what I'm about to say, which is my most recent Olympics window. I love the Olympics. I'm like very obsessed with it. I'm going right after this to watch it. And so this Summer Olympics, I got like cutouts of a lot of my favorite Olympians, most of whom are queer. And
good.
And then did all, sports romance
as you're highlighting,
go along with that.
And there's so many good sports romance out there. I have a big soft spot for the hockey romances myself.
I was talking to someone the other day, and I casually was like, oh yeah, and you know how popular gay hockey romance is, right? And they were like, no.
What?
Like, what do you mean you don't know? It's so obvious. Yeah. For some reason, I don't know the reason. Because
you know what it is? It's because it's these two men who spend a whole bunch of time on the ice, like beating the crap out of each other, right? And then they go home and they hold each other and they're very vulnerable and so sweet. And so it's that like weird, like dichotomy of like soft and mean. So.
And you can find other sports, but for some reason, like there are a lot of hockey. My favorite gay hockey writer is Rachel Reed.
I'm writing this down.
They're really good. Those are okay. So just back to our previous question briefly, those books drive me insane because they're not in print. They're only in ebook.
Of course.
So
how do you market those? Yeah.
Right. And I love those books. Like I would sell the shit out of those books. Anyway, so I mean, I will, and just like talking about, what we can do, like I will occasionally drop a publicist that I know a line and be like, these books are really good. We would sell a lot of them. And, I assume they don't really listen, but maybe sometimes they do.
Can't hurt, right? At least they
yeah.
pass it on to the author and say, hey, guess what? Someone wants to buy your book in print.
Yeah. And I will say with self-published books, not to get too in the weeds here, but because a lot of authors are genuinely doing that themselves, and it really is just like a settings thing in terms of making your books just available just on Amazon in print versus wide distribution. I have emailed many authors and been like, listen, if you did this on purpose, like Godspeed, I liked your book. Just so you know, like we can't order it and I would like to. And like 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh my God, great. Like click a button and then we can get it. So
that's awesome.
A lot of times it is worth like, dropping somebody a line.
Yeah.
And
because what are they going to do? Say no?
Well,
where are you going to be in the same spot? That's what I keep telling myself.
Right. I mean, there is like a price differential. Like it is a little bit more expensive, which is like, talk about the evil empire. That's what we call,
Amazon.
But so even if they don't want to do it for like this book, it'll put a bug in your ear for the next one.
There you go. All right. So we have, what's the deal with Waspish Widows and Ice Planet Barbarians? They seem very in vogue. I'm not entirely sure what this question is about.
Those are 2 separate books.
Yes, well, because that's one is Waspish Widows, and then Ice Planet Barbarians I don't think was on the list.
It's not because it's not gay. It's good. It's been out for actually a while. It became really popular on TikTok. So to the point where it had been self-published, a publisher bought it and repackaged it. It's what we sometimes call in romance like banana pants crazy.
I mean, sometimes you just need a book that you can just turn your brain off with, you know?
In that if you try to apply modern logic or ethics to it, it would fall apart very fast. But it's about a group of women who are on a spaceship and crash land on a planet full of blue aliens, and they can never leave, so they marry the blue alien.
So you're saying it's like that Joanna Lindsay Barbarian like series that she wrote? Does anybody remember those series?
The second one is called Barbarian Alien.
Oh my gosh. All right, well, it's just recycled nonsense because I read that when I was 16. So, I'm ready.
Very entertaining. We did it for our book club last month because they were re-releasing them and we had like 35 people show up.
I mean, that segues into our next question. What happens at Bottas Book Club? I hope it's lots of punch drinking and giggling over good romance novels is what I hope.
So, I mean, this is obviously a pandemic affected thing. Pre-pandemic, we actually had 3 separate book clubs, one of which was all queer books. We have not managed to get that one re-up yet because the person who was running it had a baby. Yay. We will eventually. So currently we just have like our sort of general book club. We named it at some point and it's like, happily everyone after, I think, or something. I don't know. We just call it club or whatever. So we're currently meeting in the park behind our store. And you can bring like a lawn chair or a towel or whatever. And it's also BYO snacks and drinks because of COVID.
Of course.
But it's really quite fun. And that we do all different subgenres of romance. So last month we did Ice Planet Barbarians. This month, the meeting was on Sunday. We actually did a graphic novel.
Oh, fun. Okay.
And it was the first time we'd ever done one. And people were really into it. It's called Heart Hunter by Mickey George. I don't know if that's the writer or the illustrator. I can't remember the other person's name.
I got Google. I'll figure it out.
Okay, yeah. Next month, if you want to join us, March 6th, we're doing a throwback, an older Beverly Jenkins, who's a fantastic Black historical author.
Yeah, before it was in vogue, like she was one of the only ones.
She's written 40 books.
Yes, she is prolific.
So we decided to do kind of an older one. It's called Captured. It's about pirates.
Pirates. Can't go wrong with a pirate romance.
And then the month after that, we're doing an upcoming book I'm very excited about. Oh God, hold on. I have to get the title right because it's long. Delilah Green Doesn't Care.
Oh, I feel like I've heard this one
which
before.
is it's a contemporary lesbian romance. I should say that's also like, I meant to say at the beginning of this, what we would call that is an FF romance, meaning that both the characters are female. In this case, they're not both lesbians. So that's an inaccurate way to describe it. It's an FF romance.
Okay, that's a good distinction, because I know that
one of them is a lesbian. I think the other one's bisexual.
Mhm.
Contemporary, I really enjoyed it. And so that's we picked it already. That's our book for April. If you want to join us for that one.
Green does. I'm sorry, I'm just writing this one down.
And I think to actually answer the question, what goes on? We talked about the book, but I think, you know, a lot of people have made really great friends.
Mhm.
You know, like not to brag, but my favorite story of all time is that some of our like very, very early attendees of book clubs, 3 women became very close. One of them moved away, and then like a year later, the other 2 went to attend her wedding in Virginia, and I was very like touched by that they, you know, had met at book club and were now going to her wedding.
And so, do they have to do anything special to in order to join, or they just show up?
Yeah,
and
no, there's no like, it's not like a membership book club. It's a drop-in book club. So you could come every month if you wanted, and there are people who do. Or you can come a month here, a month there. Yeah, you don't have to you just show up. You can RSVP on our website if you want, but it's free. It's on the events page. It also has like a map and the address of where it is. It's, like I said, it's right behind the store. But yeah, you can just show up.
Okay, well, we have reached almost the end of our time here. So, you know, I want you to go ahead and feel free to plug. I mean, feel like you've plugged the store enough, but you can never plug the store enough. So, you know, give us your like, what is your, I mean, I always talk about the elevator speech here in public services. But like, you know, tell us what, you know, you got any events coming up. I know you guys do author talks. So
yeah, so 2 things I think people would be particularly interested in. Number 1 is we have a subscription box called Read, Romance, Repeat. So if you are sort of overwhelmed about everything we've talked about tonight and just want us to pick out 2 books for you every month, this is the thing for you.
Oh, that sounds like it's Stitch Fix, but for books.
Yeah. Except I don't think you can send it back. Can you send it back?
That's fine. Yeah, you can send it back. That's fine. I'd keep it anyway.
You can send it back. So we send you 2 books every month, plus like a little gift thing, like socks or a mug or something like that. And on our website, obviously, that's Read, Romance, Repeat. And then, as I'm sure you know, if you are mainly LA people, the LA Times Festival of Books, fingers crossed, everyone please perform whatever witchcraft you believe in. It should be happening April 23rd and 24th. And 2 years ago, well, yeah, what was supposed to be 2020 that ended up being canceled, we had convinced the festival to put us in charge of romance programming because they weren't doing a very good job. And they said yes.
Like how you just stepped in, you're like, actually.
And then of course it got canceled, and then 2021 didn't even try. So theoretically 2022 happens. We're doing all the romance programming. There's 3 panels. We're bringing in like 10 authors from out of town.
Oh, awesome.
People. It's gonna be really great. It's totally free to the public. You can just show up. And that will be a good time for book people. We're the Ripped Bottas pretty much everywhere, Twitter, Instagram. We're relatively new to TikTok. If you want to see us being stupid, that's where we do it. Like our Instagram is very like professional, and our TikTok is like, whoa.
I mean, that's where you have to try it all out, see if it works, and then move it over to Instagram as you can.
Yeah, exactly. But it's quite fun. And obviously, you know, since this is an LA event, come to the actual store itself, which is on Main Street in Culver City. Our hours are on our website. But come in, have a chat, browse, enjoy. Oh, and we also ship all over the world. If you don't happen to not live in LA and be watching this, we will ship to you. Or if you live in
for
LA.
that, do you have an index online? Do they call the store? What do you prefer? Because we do oftentimes have a lot of people who show up to these programs and they don't live in LA County like at all. So I always
okay. I mean, even if you live in LA and you don't feel like leaving your house, we'll ship it to you. Yes, our website has thousands of books. You can search for things if you're looking specific, but you can also look at, you know, staff picks. or like bestsellers from 2021. And then it's broken down.
So your inventory is there. Okay.
We're talking
That's
about,
awesome.
you can also get our blind dates with a book, which are really popular, which is where we wrap the book and then we put a little sticker on the front that says like aliens in love or something like that. And signed books, all kinds of stuff on there. So yeah, everything's on our website. You can call, but we'll probably send you to the website.
I actually have one last question. This is my question. Do you still do your vintage romance? I remember you had that going for a little bit. And not, I mean, it's a lot of work, I know.
Yes, but yes and not really. We used to like list books on Instagram, like real old ones. And it was just like such a pain in the butt.
It's a chore. It's a chore.
Like during pandemic, we do have used books in the store.
Okay, good.
We just don't do them online. So that's like pretty much one of the only things where you have to come to the store to get them. If you know what you want, or if you call us and say you want a box of used books, we can help you. Email us.
Yeah, because that's one of those things like we get at the library, and that I do too, especially when I'm rethinking about what romances I read as a kid. I'm like, hey, does anybody remember that romance that had like this plot point in it? Yeah. And it was Captive Embraces by Fern Michaels.
Oh my God. If you ever need help with that, like people email us all the time and they're like, okay, so the book had a green cover and, you know, he was a knight. And we're like, okay, we need more information. But there actually is a website that has an adult word in it, so just be forewarned. It's called Smart Bitches Trashy Books.
Someone just asked, are you friends with the ladies from Beyond Heaving Bosoms? And I was like, yes, that's the same Smart Bitches Trashy Book, same one. Yes. I mean,
generally, I know most people. A lot of people I've never met in person. Beyond Heaving Bosoms, I don't think we've ever met in person, but we've talked on the online a bit. But so Smart Bitches, sorry, I'm not like
understandable. That's their brand. That's their brand.
They have a feature called Help a Bitch Out, in which you can write to them and be like, it was a green cover and he was a knight and his name was Alexander and blah, 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 blah.
She was the angel of death.
Yeah. Their collective hive mind will help you figure out what it was, because I never know.
Yeah, you can always go to your librarian, but unless they're avid romance novel readers like me, we can't always help you.
Well,
okay.
The level of detail that people sometimes have is lacking.
Or they get it confused with another book that they read at the same time, and then that is always struggling. Good. Yes.
But if they're like, the cover was green, I'm like, well, I can't really help you. Sorry.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. Martin, if you'd like to go ahead and jump in a second. Again, my name is Kay Wantuck. I am a librarian for LA County, and we have Leah here with us from the Ripped Bottas. And thank you so much for joining us. We had a great time. I'm going to go ahead and let Martin close us out and give you some information about the LA County Library.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. And I've shared a bunch of links in the chat. They're also going to go out in the email that you're going to be getting here shortly. And check out our website, lacountylibrary.org, for more virtual events coming up. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Bye, y'all.